Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of FPC Fantasy Live. I'm your host, Kyle Senra, here every Sunday morning, going 11:30 Eastern till about 12:15 um, p.m. Eastern. And yeah, we'll do 45 minutes. I'll talk about some start-sit decisions, also update the injury report, the active and active list once that becomes available. A couple of later game questionable players as well, and I'll talk about how I'm dealing with them in specific leagues, how I'm going about it. But yeah, super appreciative of anyone who's going to watch today. At any point, feel free to ask questions. The process is what I'll do is I'm going to share my spreadsheet with people. This is a spreadsheet I make every week to determine my start sit decisions, so you can see some of the things I'm thinking and how I'm making these decisions. And then we'll get to if there's any questions, I'll get to everyone else's questions at that point. So you can see how what influences those decisions that I'm making, not just for myself, but to help you all as well. And like I said, right around 12 noon, active and active reports. Once that full inactive list is available, I'll certainly share that with you all. But yes, welcome all. This is a again week 11 right now of the NFL season, and yeah, I'm super excited for today. Although it's funny because my excitement really is more football than fantasy football. Grey Cup's on today, hence the Dynasty. Not even though the Dynasty is technically funny, it's called Dynasty, and I love Dynasty Fantasy Football. It's actually technically a curling company, something else I really love. But yeah, love to talk about this. And one of my favorite parts of fantasy is making these start-sit decisions. Drafted your team to then be able to put yourself in a position to make these decisions on a weekly basis. So, yeah, I guess I'll get right to it and sharing the spreadsheet right now. So as you can see, yeah, a few things. Yeah, there we go. Now you can see them all. So yeah, just a list of players I'm deciding between in each specific league. A few factors that I look at. The first four are all fantasy, specifically fantasy points. It's the player's average through the season, the range of outcomes, floor and ceiling, as well as the projection for each player on the scoring settings for each league. Their targets per game. Sometimes, especially when it's the same position, I think it matters. But if I'm comparing wide receivers to running backs, obviously receivers are usually going to get more targets. So I won't always use it as a factor, but I still include it anyway. The defensive ranking, fantasy points allowed by the opposing defenses to that specific position. So, for instance, this first decision between McKinnon and Murray, these are both for running backs. If it's the next decision with Gabe Davis, that's fewest points allowed to wide receivers. And what I'm doing is I'm going, yeah, the fewest points. So the 32nd ranked defense is the one you want to target for fantasy. This is the worst defense, which means they allow the most fantasy points to that position. Number one defense is the team that allows the fewest points, a defense you prefer to avoid. Um, Afterwards, it's the odds makers lines, the implied total and the over-unders. I've talked about this in several weeks. I prefer to go with what the lines are set Monday morning. What did the odds makers project with their models and their systems? Because I know they adjust their lines, but they adjust their lines based on how people are. I don't trust people. Not that I trust people, but I trust the odds makers and their projections the most. There's a reason that they constantly make the money. They're the ones setting the lines. They're the ones setting up the system. So what do they think? What were their opinions of both the single team implied totals as well as the over-unders? And implied totals have to figure it out. Some sites will do calculators for you, but for the most part, use the over-unders, divide in half, and then use the spreads. Take half the spread, add it to the team that's favored from that half of that over-under. Add whatever half the spread is, you add it, and that'll give you the implied total for the team that's favored, and then you subtract it from that middle, again, half over-under, and that gives you the team lower. I mean, once you figure out one, you just calculate that with the spread. But anyway, implied totals are the specific team totals, how much the odds makers project this team will score. And the over under the game total, how much combined both teams will score. And finally, you can check out my goal line guide article at fullpresscoverage.com. I include each team's goal line grades for their rushing offense and their passing offense. This is influenced by themselves, by the matchup. The implied total also does feed in there, but a lot of it is the touchdown And again, goal line means specifically inside the 5. What are the upside chances that a team scores a touchdown? And the goal line guy differential is the each it's the team's difference between like our players' difference between their teams passing and rushing grade and depending what position that player is, it'll go in one direction or the other. So again, for these first ones where I'm talking running backs, a negative differential means there's a positive, like the team's passing goal line grade is higher than their rushing grade. If it's a receiver and it's negative, then it's the opposite. It means the rushing grade is higher. And then conversely, so yeah, the running backs I'm looking at. Um, for some reason, I don't think in French. Parapoda. I'm looking for for running back specifically. I'm looking at their rushing goal line grade score, and for the defenses or for every other position, I'm looking at the passing score. And the opposing defenses do influence both of those. And that's all about touchdown upside and ability to access ceiling. So just looking at some of these decisions, I actually wanted to get to this one where the color indicators I use for the stats themselves, green means the highest, orange means the lowest. When it comes to the player decisions, I'll put blue for the player starting, orange for the player that's not. I just like having. I like orange so much, so I keep putting that, but I like having the different color between blue and green. But anyway, this one league, Money Ballers, where I don't have the decision marked yet, and this was a tricky one because there were several factors. It wasn't just these players that I was deciding between, but also this is a league where I have Justin Jefferson, and until yesterday, he hadn't been fully ruled out yet, so there was a chance he was going to play. So that would have also impacted. Not that it matters now, but this league, we ended up having to start 3 running backs, and the 3 I put in were Derrick Henry, Ty Chandler, who looks to be the Vikings starting running back this week, and then Isaiah Pacheco. And then we start 4 wide receivers. There's also 3 flex spots, one of which is a super flex. So essentially, assuming you're starting 2 quarterbacks, one of the super flex spot, you can start up to 5 running backs or up to 6 wide receivers. It'll either, if you go 5 running backs, it's only 4 wide receivers. If you go 6 wide receivers, it's only 2 running backs. And you can play with those numbers in there. I had it set where initially wanted 6 wide receivers in. But unfortunately, all the wide receivers I played, none of them play at 8:20 on Sunday or on Monday night, which means that there was no replacement possible for Jefferson. The 3 now the only 2 players in my starting lineup that were playing at that time or later were 2 running backs, but they were in the RB spots of Ty Chandler and Isaiah Pacheco. So, what I was originally planning to do was actually, in spite of Chuba Hubbard not looking so great in the start-sit spreadsheet, I was gonna play him anyway, throw either Chandler or Pacheco in the flex spot, doesn't really matter which one. And then if Jefferson was in, I would then take out that running back. Likely would have been Chandler. If figuring if Jefferson's in, maybe means he'll pass more. So I was going to put Hubbard in the RB spot, Chandler in the flex spot, and then if Jefferson played, would take out Chandler to put in Jefferson. However, because the Vikings were nice enough to rule out Jefferson the day before, I don't have to make that tough decision. So then it really does come down to who are the best players. So the first thing I look at is of these 4 players here, Gabe Davis, Chuba Hubbard, Donald Conner, and Christian Watson, I have to start 2 of them. And so the first thing I do when it's okay, I've got to start multiple from this list. What is that number? And then I'll use that number. So in this case, 2. How many of these categories was a player in the top 2 for? I guess technically. But yeah, the 2 it was all pretty close to be honest. But Gabe Davis and Hubbard had 5 stats where they were the top 2. Now for Gabe Davis, he was of all 5 of those, he was the highest, as you can see. So if he wasn't the highest, he wasn't in the top 2. But the 5 stats where he was the top 2, they were all the highest. For Hubbard, only one of those where he was the highest, and he was the second highest in 4 other categories. Donald Parham was top 2 in 4 categories. Christian Watson was top 2 in 4 as well. So it was super close, but technically Gabe Davis and Hubbard were the ones that stood out. This is, by the way, a half PPR league, so would normally go to the running backs. But then what I did was I count the difference between the categories where they're the highest and then they're the lowest. So, for instance, Gabe Davis has 5 categories where he's the highest. Average points per year. He's got the best ceiling game of any of these 4 players so far this season. The Bills' implied total is the highest, slightly higher than the Chargers. The goal line grade, the passing game, and the goal line grade differential are also the highest. So 5 categories where Gabe Davis was the highest, and 3 where he was the lowest. 0 he put up a 0 last week, so we know what his floor is. The Jets, the fewest fantasy points to wide receiver in half PPR, so matchup is likely the worst. Also, the over/under for the game expected to not be a big shootout. So 5 categories where he was the highest, 3 where he was the lowest, which gets a +2. In those same instances, Hubbard was -2, Parham was -2, and then Christian Watson +2. So the one that's kinda stood out to me is Gabe Davis, as much as it's a really bad matchup, and he didn't do great against the Jets in week 1. I would say the Bills' offense in general didn't do great against the Jets offense in week 1. Kinda leads towards Gabe Davis being the guy, and then Christian Watson is the other starter. Benching Chuba Hubbard in this pretty difficult matchup. Great defense in the Cowboys. The goal line grade and the goal line guide differential are pretty negative for Hubbard, so not doesn't look like there's a lot of high upside touchdown chances. One thing that sticks out for Washington is this matchup. All of these other players are playing teams that are ranked in the top 10 of fantasy points allowed position, so these are really good defenses. The Chargers have allowed the 27th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, which means it's the 6th most. So, definitely up there in terms of a matchup, so and the other complication is I don't actually have Donald Parham on my team, but looking at the waiver wire, he was the best free agent available. So, for me, I think there was is it worth picking or if he stood out as the best player of these options, I would have gone and picked him up. I think I got Taylor Heineke, who's apparently today it's just been announced that Desmond Ridder will start the rest of the season, so Heineke probably droppable even in a super flex league. So I could have done that, but ultimately I've decided to leave Barnes as a free agent because it just didn't seem like it was really worth it to go with him. The options I already had were probably likely better starts for me. Yeah, so, there's a couple of these leagues where I'm saying if Devon Achane out, it looks as though he's expected to play. So this one particular decision, Romeo Doubs, Jahan Dotson, I just bench both until Achane. In this other league, I would have had to start 2, but if Achane plays, I only have to start 1, so likely means just Tutu Atwell. Uh, it was pretty easy to in fact, I've actually since doing this spreadsheet just yesterday, I've actually dropped Wan'Dale Robinson and Gallup off this team, 'cause they seem to not be worth starting at all. Like Westbrook Akine is right on that cusp. So it really when it if A-Chain was out, it would have been super easy just to go with Atwell and KJ Osborne. Tough between those 2 though. Technically, Osborne is the top 2 in more categories. When it came time to compare their best to their worst, they were both pretty close. The one thing with the average, Tutu Atwell is one of the most difficult players to evaluate. He averaged 10.41 fantasy points in this format. However, that includes all the games where Cooper Kupp did play. If you count just since when Cooper Kupp has returned, it goes down to 7.26, which is among the lower of this group of players. KJ Osborne's average was from a ceiling perspective as well, like, Tutu Atwell's best game came without Cooper Kupp, but since Cooper Kupp's there, he hasn't scored more than 10.1 points, which would be the lowest ceiling of everyone. So it's been tough to evaluate him, to say the least. That being said, it's a pretty negative goal line. Yes, I think it's the second largest goal line guide differential this week. It's the Rams, because their rushing goal line grade is the highest of the week. Actually, you could see it here in the where Henderson is decision. 116.75 is the highest goal line grade of any team this week. So, which that's the typical tendency for the Rams, right? Be run heavy in the red zone, so the ceiling comes through the run game and the rushing touchdowns, not so much through the passing game. So, uh, still though, in spite of that, I'm gonna go with Tutu Atwell. Just because if I compare Atwell directly to Osborne, take out everyone else who is better in more categories, it's Atwell. So yeah, the average has kind of neutralized itself out. If you're looking at the overall average, it's better for Atwell, but if you're looking at just since when Cooper Kupp joined, it technically goes to Osborne. Still, Atwell, even with that, he's had the highest floor. He scored 4 points in every game. He's actually got a floor, unlike anyone else here. Now, the best ceiling performance does belong to Osborne. Technically, it'd be tied, which is crazy that it's that close. But if since Kupp's been back, Atwell hasn't really reached that ceiling at all. Again, 10.1 is the best he's been able to do. Now he's projected to score the most, don't know how accurate the projections are. He's also got the most targets per game, more than Osborne. Better defensive matchup for Osborne, but the implied total and the game over under definitely favor Atwell, and then the goal line guide stuff goes with Osborne. But that's one, two, three, only four categories where he leads, whereas Atwell has one, two, three, four, five. So just slightly. And I got them really close in my rankings, but I'm gonna go with Atwell. Again, if A Chain is ruled out, and we'll find out for sure in the next like 10 minutes, then I'd play both and pretty easily play both. In fact, actually, Osborne does give me a chance to access Alexander Madison later. So that's the one advantage where I would maybe go against what's in here and just play Osborne, and that way, if I need to and it's revealed Alexander Madison's active, I might then wanna choose to pivot towards him. So, as much as I've kinda set myself on Atwell, I am kinda thinking now part of me thinks Madison doesn't play. The concussions, usually players, if they suffer a concussion, for the most part, won't play the next week. So I guess we'll find out tonight, and we'll test that theory for sure. Now, comparing KJ Osborne to a couple of running backs, Darrell Henderson, James Conner, it was easily those 2 over Osborne. Um, I specifically picked up Osborne because in this league, and I'll talk about it in a second, I've got Tyler Lockett questionable. So, knowing he's questionable, I wanted to have another option because if I didn't pick up Osborne, I would have had to play Connor anyway, because then Henderson would have been my really only option to replace Lockett in case he's out. But now I've picked up Osborne, so okay, let me actually make this decision. Still, Connor looks to be the best, so um, a lot goes in his favor. So I'm going to go with James Conner in that instance. And then finally, Josh Dobbs versus Russell Wilson. One of the toughest decisions I've had this week. I literally have them back to back in my QB rankings. I think it's QB 15 and 16. So, in a super flex league, I'm already playing Justin Fields, so for my second spot, Dobbs versus Wilson, and it's so close. The margins really are slim. Yeah, so 4 categories where Dobbs leads, 4 categories where Wilson leads, so it's really close. Then it became time to, okay, what was the difference in those? And really the one that was closest was the projections. 17.79 for Dobbs is his projection, 18.48 for Wilson. That projection was so close that I gave basically Wilson a half point instead of a full point, and that is ultimately what's coming down as the difference. The goal line guide differentials favor Dobbs. I wanna default anywhere, it's typically that because it's the ceiling I'm chasing. Obviously, they're playing each other, so the over-under is the same since it's the same game. The Broncos were favored, so that's why they get the implied total, but even though the Broncos are favored and this implied total feeds into the goal line guide, the goal line grade still favors the Vikings, so that says something, and it was enough for me to put Dobbs ahead of Wilson in my rankings and put him in the starting lineup. So, yeah, so that's my process in terms of how I make start sit decisions. And yeah. So, I guess, well, I hinted at it, so I'll get to it now. Yeah, there's 2 players that I have in my leagues that are questionable later. I've got a few players that are questionable right now, but we're about to find out if they're active or not. But yeah, Tyler Lockett, I've already mentioned it. What do you do with Tyler Lockett? I would say and the best thing to do with these later game questionable players, I always say this, put them in the flex spot because that opens up the possibilities of replacement. For instance, if Tyler Lockett is ruled out, I'll replace him with Darrell Henderson. He's got a great goal line guide matchup, really good high touchdown upside. So I feel strong about that. So again, the reason that's possible is because I'm putting Tyler Lockett in flex. Alexander Madison, another one, where it's a tight end premium league, and I basically picked up the Vikings' 3rd tight end, Johnny Munt, just 'cause Josh Oliver and obviously Hockenson were already rostered. And again, because I put Madison in the flex spot, this allows me to say I'm gonna throw in a tight end. Not that Johnny Munt's a great high upside play, but that's again just the advice I would give is those players that are questionable, you're not sure about, put them in the flex. Frankly, ugh, excuse me, sorry, folks. Frankly, I'm very pro putting your Monday players in the flex like automatically. So, I talked about this on the Full Course Fantasy Pod, I think. This would be to me a week to go with 2 tight ends. If you're gonna like, if you've got Travis Kelce, play him in the flex and put another tight end in that starting tight end spot. If there's a tight end that you feel like has a high enough upside that you can pick up, go do that. play Kelsey in the flex, and if something happens to Kelsey, and that we saw that hyperextended knee at the start of the year, we don't know if he hyperextends it Monday and we get noted that before the game, and there's a chance you can pivot off of him. If you leave him in the tight end spot, you're really stuck at just replacing him with the tight end. But if you can take another player, different position, put him in the flex. So uh, typically when I have Kelsey, it's okay, especially in a redraft league, you have Kelsey, you roster Kelsey, you start him every week to the point where you will just then decide, okay, Kelsey is the only guy I'm going to roster. I'm going to use all my roster spots in every other position, but the weeks where they play Mondays are the weeks where I'd consider you go pick up someone else, put them in the tight end spot, and you can flex Kelsey that way. Again, I wouldn't do that just to put a body at tight end. If there's someone that's available that has a high enough upside, there's one instance, and it's an 8-team league, so 8 teams are a lot shallower. Someone actually dropped Kincaid, and I went and picked him up, and I'm basically doing that. I'm putting Kincaid in the tight end spot, playing Kelsey in the flex if I need to replace him. And by an emergency situation Monday, I'll have access to that. I'll have access to every other position. All right, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually not quite 12 noon, but I'm going to see if the active and inactive reports are available. I usually go to RotoWire for this. Inactive, we're week 11. I find they've just got a great list. Pretty clean and easy to read. Looks like all the teams are there, so I will partake in reading. All right. So, starting with the Arizona Cardinals, Michael Carter is inactive, as is Amari DeMarcado at running back. And so maybe not so surprising. I mean, DeMarco's been dealing with an injury, so James Conner's the lead guy. Keontae Ingram will be the main back. I wonder if Michael Carter will eventually become the backup, but the Jets just released him. The Cardinals just signed him this week. I wonder if eventually they'll get him ready, but I think he just doesn't quite know the offense yet, so they're not gonna throw him out his first week he gets there. I wonder if as early as next week, though, we see Michael Carter active and as the main, uh, Panther or not Panthers, Cardinals running back. We'll get to the Panthers next. A couple receivers are out, Zach Pascal and Michael Wilson. Believe Pascal was ruled out yesterday. I don't think anyone's actually playing Zach Pascal. I think I brought him in one league, I'm not even sure why, to be honest. Michael Wilson, though, the rookie wide receiver, he's inactive. So it really does put it all on Marquise Brown and Rondale Moore. And I know I was super low on Rondale Moore. You guys consensus this week. I had him like wide receiver 70. I may raise him up now that we know Michael Wilson is out. But I'd expect most of the targets go to Marquise Brown and then the tight end Trey McBride. Even the number 2 wide receiver, Rondale Moore, I wouldn't want to play him. I don't think I roster him in any league anyway, so not a decision I have to make. Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much there. Kyler Murray's active, though. We saw it last week, and he looks like he's fine. He's going good, so should be a great week for him. Yeah, start him, start Marquise Brown, start James Conner, Trey McBride, one in every position, essentially. Carolina Panthers. So Harris Marshall's inactive, which has been the case. He's been kind of a healthy scratch. Thielen's the number 1 wide receiver. That's very clear and apparent. I've gone with the top 10 wide receiver this week in spite of the fact that they play the Cowboys. Looks like the rookie Jonathan Mingo has emerged as the number 2 guy. So he'd be the only other Panthers receiver I'd consider playing. Tight end Hayden Hurst is out. So, I mean, Tommy Tremble's the starting tight end, and it's a great goal line grade for the Panthers passing game. I don't I don't love playing a tight end with Panthers. Thielen's probably the only guy I really wanna start. And then, Hubbard if you really need to, but mostly just Adam Thielen. Even Bryce Young, I suppose if it's a super flex league, you may not have a choice, but in single QB redraft, I don't even know if Bryce Young's rosterable, to be honest, so let alone startable. Alright, so Chicago Bears. Um, the only inactives offensively are quarterback Nathan Peterman and wide receiver Bellis Jones. And Peterman's inactive because Justin Fields is back and he will start today. I have him as I wanna say a top 10 quarterback. I think he's QB 10 or 11 in my rankings for the week, so definitely think he's a strong start and we're playing. Every week I've got him in, he's in the lineup. And then Bellis Jones really hasn't done much, so it's not much of effect there. Really only want DJ Moore in terms of wide receivers. Darnell Mooney is just really tough. It's really tough to even start him. So DJ Moore, tight end Cole Kmet. Um, sorry. I guess the news is at running back, all three will be active today, which I don't think that's happened yet this year. I know Foreman was inactive early in the season, it's a healthy scratch, and then once Herbert got hurt, that's when Foreman started playing every game. He's done so well to the point where I think they decided these are the three we're going with. So Khalil Herbert active, Dante Foreman, I'd imagine, is the main backman. Roshan Johnson will be active. I don't really expect much from him, so not really at this point, not really startable for me. Cleveland Browns, Marquise Goodwin is inactive. He had maybe been the 3rd wide receiver on the team. I mean, Dorian Thompson-Robinson will be starting at QB, so I don't really know that I'd wanna even roster Marquise Goodwin, let alone play him. Even Elijah Moore is a tough start. I wouldn't I wanna avoid the tight ends too, like, I don't really wanna play David Njoku. Same thing as Tommy Tremble. Those offensive those quarterbacks, rookie quarterbacks specifically, I don't love these tough, difficult matchups. Browns get the Steelers, Panthers get the Cowboys, is really good defenses. I'd rather not play the tight ends. We'll start one at each position. They're so like because you don't have to fill up 3 wide receivers, something like that. That's where you might have to play like an Elijah Moore, but I feel like with only starting 1 tight end, have David Njoku. I feel like there's a viable replacement out there that'll be in a better offensive situation. So David Njoku definitely a sit for me. In fact, I even cut him in a league. Me, my co-manager Keely and I, we had Jake Ferguson anyway, so we're just gonna ride out Jake Ferguson all year. Yeah, leave David Njoku on the bench. But speaking of Jake Ferguson, looking at his team, the Dallas Cowboys, Nico Dowdle was questionable, but he will be active, and instead they made Deuce Vaughn and healthy scratch. So Rico Dowdle looks like he'll be the main backup running back in a great matchup. Like the Panthers are one of the worst run defenses in the league, so I expect a big week from Pollard. I've been ranking him pretty high all season, almost stubbornly. If he really fails in this game, okay, then he's gonna just completely drop my weekly ranking. He might anyway, but this is a week where I'm gonna rank him highly. Start him everywhere you have him. This is a great matchup. If he really fails to produce here, then the dream is probably done. And then you really have to consider him not to be an RB1 at all, maybe not even an RB2. So, yeah, yeah, Deuce Vaughn really the only fantasy relevant inactive. Trey Lance is inactive. Yeah, fantasy relevance, right? That doesn't even matter. Looking at the Detroit Lions, doesn't look like there's any really fantasy relevant players. There's Stephen Gilmore. Now, it's not Stephon Gilmore, Stephen Gilmore, so I have no idea who he is. He's a corner. He's inactive. Like, is Stephon Gilmore on the Lions? No, he's on the Cowboys. There is a Stephen Gilmore apparently in the NFL, but he won't be playing today. Um, yeah, no fantasy relevance really. Antoine Green, a wide receiver, is the only Lion receiver inactive, but means all the good Lions players we want should be healthy and in the game. Go Pack Go! Green Bay Packers. Oh wait, Jair Alexander's out. A matchup where they be facing Keenan Allen. That's not good. So yeah, no Jair Alexander, no Rudy Ford, no Phil Douglas, no Darnell Savage, no Eric Stokes. Literally the entire Packers starting secondary is out. Keyshawn Nixon at slot corner. You've got Valentine and Valentine as your outside corners. Jonathan Owens at safety. I don't even know who the other starting safety is going to be. Play your Chargers, folks. This should be a this. I'm not looking forward to this. I'm not gonna lie. This is not going to be fun for a Packers perspective. I don't think. Um, they lost to Kenny Pickett last week, and Kenny Pickett didn't even play well. So what are they going to do against Justin Fields without their secondary, without their entire secondary? You're on the Houston Texans. That's a team that hasn't been disappointing. They've been so great lately. Noah Brown has been fantastic. Unfortunately, you don't. He's after this week will be my most rostered player overall in fantasy. Currently tied with Christian Kirk. But yeah, Noah Brown inactive, so you won't be able to get to play him. Also, Damian Pierce inactive at running back, so Devin Singletary will get the start once again. He was not great with all the opportunity 2 weeks ago against the Buccaneers. Was phenomenal last week. So um, Cardinals defense probably is that's a good matchup. So expect Singletary does it's closer to last week than it will be 2 weeks ago, I would say. As for Noah Brown's injury, Nico Collins is back to being active, so I'd imagine the main 2 receivers are Tank Dell and Nico Collins. Based on, like, the targets, it really does look like Tank Dell has emerged to be the Texans' number 1 wide receiver, so I've got him ranked, like, wide receiver 8, 9, 10, somewhere in that range, this week. Pretty high on Nico Collins as well. I'd expect Robert Woods as the 3rd wide receiver. He will be active this game. I don't expect necessarily too much high upside. I would think the 3 pass catchers we really wanna play are, again, Collins, Tank Dell certainly, and then the tight end, Dalton Schultz. You need to play Robert Woods. I think he's a great option, but not gonna start him in every league. Jacksonville Jaguars, which apparently my, co-host Brad Harvin on the Full Press Fantasy, he will be at this game, so he'll check it out. Not really any fantasy relevant players inactive there. Elijah Cooks at wide receiver, who I frankly have never heard of, so no one's rostering him anyway. Oh, look at that. Going to the Chargers. A Chargers wide receiver is hurt. They've lost Mike Williams for the year. They've put Josh Palmer on IR. Now Jalen Guyton, they recently re-signed. He's out for the game. Good news is Keenan Allen is playing. I suppose Quentin Johnson will be that number 2 receiver. But yeah, it's not looking. Oh, and yeah, and tight end Gerald Everett is inactive, so gives a boost to Johnston, let's say, in terms of targets, but also Donald Parham will be starting at tight end. So I wonder, just with all the injuries, both Guyton and Everett being out, and then the aforementioned Palmer and Williams injuries, if Donald Parham will actually see an increase in targets. Usually, he hasn't been getting a lot of targets this year, but he's been getting a lot of touchdowns. I wonder if he could potentially get both this week. So yeah, and then Isaiah Spiller at running back is inactive. He hasn't been able to surpass Josh Kelly, and that's been kind of a problem because Kelly hasn't been super efficient. Seemed like Spiller coming out last year had the talent, the relative athletic score, but certainly the college tape and the production to say he could factor in, but he's basically done nothing through 2 years. Disappointment for Isaiah Spiller. Vegas Raiders, the Vaders, someone's father anyway. Brian Hoyer is inactive at quarterback. He's been third anyway. Aiden O'Connell looks like he's in line to get the start. And if something happens to him, Garoppolo will be the backup. They've committed to starting Aiden O'Connell the rest of the year. Miami Dolphins, this is interesting. Jeff Wilson is inactive. So big news, Devon A. Chan. They need to use phonetic spelling. They really do. Because when someone tweets out, this is how his name should be pronounced, and they just spell it, it doesn't tell me anything. Is it Devon Lachan? That's like I could read it that way too. So phonetic spelling, folks. Phonetic spelling. There's a reason it's useful. It'll let us know how to pronounce things. That really should come from NFL teams, by the way. I think specifically for Achan, it was been called A-Chain all through college. Texas A&M had never bothered to ask him how to pronounce his name, so the media people are constantly calling him A-Chain. We all, as a result, did the same. Now I've got to deprogram that. It's Devon A-Chain. He's active. He's playing. Yay! I've got him in 4 leagues. I'm going to start him in 3. Maybe that one where I bench him is going to be a mistake, but we'll find out. But yeah, Jeff Wilson inactive, so that means it's Mostert, obviously, and I still would rank Mostert the highest. Like, he's another top 10 running back for me. I think I've got him at RB9 this week. I'd imagine he still gets the biggest week. We'll see Achane coming back from injury. Last time he came back from injury, that first week back, they gave him, like, 1 carry. Now, what happened is the next week he exploded for 52 points, did, like, 200 yards. So, once that's genie's out of the bottle, like, I don't think they can put that back in, and they're only gonna give him 1 carry. So I'd imagine he's startable today. But I still think Mostert is the guy you wanna play more. I mean, play both, but I certainly have Mostert ranked a lot higher. Yeah, Jeff Wilson, if that means Salvin Ahmed would be the 3rd running back. I wouldn't necessarily play him. Tight end Durham Smythe is inactive. I honestly have no idea who they're even starting at tight end, and frankly, it hasn't mattered. They're not going to the tight ends. At wide receiver, Braxton Berrios and Chase Claypool are also both inactive. So, most of the targets will go to Tyreek and Waddle. That's and probably passed a little bit to Achane. Achane. You see? I can't do it. It's chained in my brain too much, apparently. Um, Giants. Deion Jackson's inactive. I didn't even know he was on the Giants. I know obviously he was on the Colts for his first 2 years. They released him. With the Browns for a bit, I guess they released him. Now he's on the Giants, but he's not playing, so it doesn't matter. But that does mean Saquon Barkley will be active. I don't love Barkley this week. I think I got him even outside the top 20. Maybe that's a mistake, but I wonder at some point if they are limiting his touches. Maybe not. maybe that'll be too low and it's a complete mistake. For the Steelers, Minkah Fitzpatrick's gonna miss again, but again, the Browns are starting Dorian Thompson-Robinson, so I don't think they can necessarily exploit that matchup. It would mean, I think, in theory, a good week for Elijah Moore. Whoever's in the slot, as we saw last week with the Packers, Big B was the best receiver for the Packers and operating out of the slot, and I think part of that was not having Minkah Fitzpatrick in coverage. So maybe Elijah Moore is startable. I think I'm gonna start him in a couple leagues. Tennessee Titans, Treylon Burks still inactive with that, concussion, I believe, so Nick Westbrook-Ikhine should still be the number 2 receiver behind DeAndre Hopkins. I don't necessarily wanna play Westbrook-Ikhine. If you're desperate enough, though, I think he's worthy of starting. The Jags do give up a lot of points to the wide receivers, so I think he's definitely doable. Malik Willis inactive, which means Tannehill's back to the team in terms of active, but he'll be the backup behind Will Levis. And finally, the Washington Commanders, Antonio Gibson is inactive. So he's been ruled out. I wonder if Chris Rodriguez will suddenly get some more opportunities, but I'd imagine this is a big week for Brian Robinson, who'll get basically almost all the touches. And we do have a question. Thank you, Zach Lee, for tuning in. Oh, look at that, Chris Rodriguez question. So Latavius Murray or Chris Rodriguez is one decision in a 14-team PPR. The other one is Donald Parham or Cade Otton. So I think first off, I would go Parham over Otton. I pulled my rankings right now, but I'm pretty certain I have Parham ahead of Cade Otton. Without Gerald Everett, and the Packers are actually pretty decent against tight ends, but still, I think the opportunity should be there to the point where I will definitely play Parham over Cade Otton. I don't love that Otton. Oh, never mind, I lied. I have Otton 2 spots ahead of Parham in my rankings, but I feel like I wanna change that because, again, the news that Everett's out officially, I think I'm yeah, moving Parham up. So, um, honestly, Parham or Luke Musgrave. I wanna go with a better quarterback almost. I'll probably leave Musgrave ahead of him, but yeah, that's at the point where I would go Donald Parham with this news, this offense. Again, I'm a little worried about the 49ers defense. Any more vulnerable on the outside than they are on the inside. So wide receivers tend to succeed more than tight ends. Considering Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are on that team, I'd imagine that's where the Bucks go to. With Parham, Chargers may really not have a choice. It's Keenan Allen, it's uh, Quentin Johnson, and then Donald Parham. Those are your 3 main pass catching weapons. I mean, actually, it really is Austin Eckler. Like I expect targets for him too. Latavius Murray, Chris Rodriguez, that's the tough one. Having to like the Gibson news is interesting. And I guess the one thing we don't know is Fournette gonna be active? But safe playing it safe to me would be going Chris Rodriguez. I just don't know how much upside, how many opportunities he's really gonna get, or if the team just decides, "Let's just give everything to Brian Robinson." So tricky. Who's the goal line guy? I'm pretty sure the goal line guide will say favor the Washington running back, but I'm going to pull that up anyway. So week 11, the Bills' rushing goal line grade is 59.25, and that's 31 points behind their passing grade. Both pretty negative. Low average goal line grade score, and then one of the like, I think it's the second highest goal line differential favoring the passing game. So likely be a lot more passing touchdowns for the Bills. Tough to run against. Tough to do anything against the Jets, but, teams near the goal line have had more success passing on them than rushing. And then, yeah, who's the, sorry, the other player is, oh, yeah, Chris Rodriguez. So Washington, 87 for the goal line grade and a plus 24 run differential. Yeah, I think, again, the one thing that scares me playing Murray right now is we don't know if Fournette is active, and if Fournette's active, does he completely take over Murray's role? If both teams are playing at the same time and we knew Fournette was out, I might be willing to risk it on Murray. I think take advantage of the fact that Antonio Gibson's out and go with Chris Rodriguez this week. So Zach, I would go Chris Rodriguez, and I would go Donald Parham, both of these decisions. Again, pretty close between Parham and Otton. I know I guess looking at the goal line grade, yeah, so the Chargers have a better passing goal line grade than the Bucks, but because the Bucks' rushing grade is worse and the Chargers' rush grade is actually really great, the differential actually favors the Bucks. They're almost equal, 67.5 to 68, so it's almost an equal differential, but technically it slightly favors the pass game, whereas there's a 10.5 point difference favoring the run game for the Chargers. So I think that's initially why I had Otton ahead of Parham, but again, with news that Everett's out, I think it's enough to make me move up Parham ahead. So I'll go Donald Parham. I'll go Chris Rodriguez. Again, to me, I think here's the thing. To me, Rodriguez is playing it safe because we know he's going to be the main backup, but I also think there's more upside there against the Giants than there is for Murray against the Jets. So the way I see it, um, yeah, the way I see it, yeah, the more I think about it, Rodriguez seems not only safer than Murray, but I think he has the better upside too. So yeah, Chris Rodriguez, I think he's a junior, and then Donald Parham Jr. We'll go with the two juniors. But yeah, thank you. I know Zach saying thank you for the insight. Thank you for the question, Zach. Getting my brain thinking and making me look through these rankings and make some tough decisions. Appreciate it. Maybe some of the people listening are in similar situations. Did I miss the injury report? Any last minute? Yes, you freaking rule. I think you rule, Gladys. Okay, I'll quickly run through. Um, yeah, Michael Wilson from the Cardinals is out. Um, thinking like Hayden Hurst, Panthers tight end is out. Harrison Marshall's out. I think those were announced yesterday. Marquise Goodwin for the Browns is out. Rico Dowdle was questionable. He's in. Devon Achane was questionable. He's in. Jeff Wilson's out. Um, Noah Brown, Damian Pierce are out. I think they announced that yesterday, though. Jalen Guyton is out, in case anyone's thinking of playing him for the Chargers, as is Gerald Everett. So both that wide receiver and tight end respectively are both out for the Chargers. In Miami, no Braxton Berrios, no Jeff Wilson, no Durham Smythe, no Chase Claypool. So those four players are inactive for the Dolphins. I don't know if anyone's really playing any of them. Even Jeff Wilson's been tough to play since he's returned. He hasn't quite done much. Treylon Burks is inactive, and then I think the biggest news today is Antonio Gibson is out. That's the one massive news. Oh, and we're getting some more questions here at the end. So Matt Zed or Matt Z, sorry if you're probably American. I prefer to say it Z, but Matt is asking Tua, Fields, or Goff. I'm gonna look at my rankings. I'm pretty sure I've got Goff right now. No, actually, I don't. Tua is my QB3 this week. Um, traditionally, and this is why the Raiders traditionally have a better run defense than pass defense. That secondary doesn't look great. Um, so yeah, I could see. I mean, I still think Poster could have a good week based on volume, but yeah, I'd go with Tua against the Raiders. I think that's going to be the more upside on the matchup. I love Goff against the Bears, and with such high upside options as Fields and Goff, or sorry, as Tua and Goff, I wouldn't risk it with Fields. And this was something that Gladys and I actually talked about yesterday on the In No Particular Order podcast. The leagues I have Fields, I typically don't have a Goff or a Tua. So, like, I feel like I've got, like, in some of these leagues, I literally have one of the leagues, I literally only have Fields and Aiden O'Connell this week since I've got Minshew and Mac Jones, all of them are on bye. So, yeah, and I had Kirk Cousins, and he's on injured reserve. So, in that particular league, I literally have no choice but to play Fields and Aiden O'Connell. Plus, I suppose I could just take one out and play Sheila Hubbard. I don't really wanna do that. But yeah, in league so, to Gladys's point yesterday, like, do you have to play Fields? I would say you don't, especially when you have high upside options like this. Coming off the injury, it's a tough Lions defense. I would avoid Fields for sure. And then decide between Tua and Goff. One thing about I guess the one thing that works against both of those quarterbacks is they're heavily favored. Do they need to throw much? Will these teams just be super run heavy? But again, I feel like both defenses are better against the run than they are against the pass. So I think there is a high upside to be had through the passing game. So again, rankings comparison, I've got Tua at QB3, Jared Goff at QB6. So super close, but for Matt, I would lean Tua. I really like this matchup against the Raiders just a little more. And then asking about Puka Nacua, Aaron Jones, Hollywood Brown at flex in a PPR league. All right, again, not Packers bias at all, but I will say the only way the Packers win is if Aaron Jones has a monster game. And I think the Packers probably know that. This Chargers defense is very weak against the run. Even in full PPR, and I mean, to be fair, Jones does get such an advantage from catching passes. Typically, if you're asking me running back versus wide receiver, even in full PPR, if it's a running back that's gonna get volume, I'll usually prefer that. So I will admit, Matt, there's a bit of bias here. Bias in 2 ways, my running back bias and my Packers bias. Both are saying go with Aaron Jones. It is such a great matchup against the Chargers, but if you truly think the Packers offense will just suck, it makes sense to avoid him. Um, I'll go back to the goal line guide. Um, so if I look at just those 3 teams in those 3 situations, the Cardinals have the best passing goal line grade, 86 for their score. Packers is 67.25, and the Rams are 65.25. So just at the pure score, it's saying Cardinals are better. Uh, and I guess the Packers really would like prefer a higher run um, goal line differential. But so all 3 of those players technically have a negative differential. For Puka and for Brown, their teams have better rushing goal line grades than passing. Again, the Rams, I mentioned earlier, they have the highest rushing goal line grade. They have the highest goal line grade of any team this week. The Rams have been so run heavy in the red zone. My fear with Puka is there's not a ton of upside. When it gets close, all the touchdowns will go to running back. And because it's the Seahawks and their run defense near the goal line is absolutely abysmal, the worst in the league, they'll be able to succeed on that. So I don't love the upside from Puka. If you think he's got a high floor for his performance, I suppose that could make sense. But I would say not Puka, although I'm gonna look at my rankings, because I may have Puka ranked ahead of Marquise Brown, which I think that would almost default the answer to Aaron Jones. Yeah, I've got Marquise Brown at wide receiver 31, which is crazy low for me. I'm surprised it's even that low, and Puka at 26. So, I'm just gonna say Puka there, but again, my feeling is in spite of my bias, I don't know if you trust me in spite of the bias, but yeah, Aaron Jones, I have him ranked at RB13. Again, the Chargers' run defense has been so bad that, if you're flexing Aaron Jones, I'd imagine you have 2 really solid running backs already. I love that. I love playing 3 running backs, getting all that volume. I think there's upside with Jones as well in this matchup against the Chargers. So to answer your question again, Matt, I would go with Tua, although I can't really fault you for going Goff. The Bears, they're playing that for all, but yeah, I would go Tua, and then I would go Aaron Jones, leaving Fields and Goff on the bench, as well as leaving Puka Nacua and Hollywood Brown on the bench. I know on the Going for Two, Twitter group, someone had a question about Puka, and we discussed that, and it seemed like a lot of us were in favor of benching Puka, so it'd be a popular opinion. Wait, this is full press coverage. But anyway, the other group I went Going for Two, which does include Gladys, um, we were all kind of anti-Puka this week anyway. We run heavy for the Rams. So yeah, I definitely I yeah, Aaron Jones for me in this decision, 2 in this decision. To go back to Zach's decision again, we had 2 questions: Latavius Murray or Chris Rodriguez, and then a tight end, Donald Parham or Cade Otton. That Parham-Otton one is tough. I've kinda gone back and forth all week. I'd go Parham, though I just raised him ahead of in rankings. And then Chris Rodriguez or Latavius Murray. Not knowing if Fournette's active later, I would play it safe with Rodriguez, but I also think Washington run game, no Antonio Gibson, I think Rodriguez actually has higher upside than Latavius. So that one, the more I think about it, the more that one becomes easier to me, and I would say go with Chris Rodriguez. Now I'm gonna have to adjust my rankings. I had Rodriguez pretty low, also still have ranked Antonio Gibson. So I'm gonna get to go, change some of my rankings right now, which you can find on fullpresscoverage.com. You'll find the goal line guide article there every week. And I'll be here every Sunday talking here on Full Press Fantasy Live. Talk about start sit decisions, whether it's my own, saw earlier in the episode, or listeners and viewers and their questions that I love helping out with. We have given you guys the right advice here. And then, yeah, active and inactive reports we talked about, just updating the news on Antonio Gibson's injury. That seems like that's the big one. Now, I will say, I think he was listed as doubtful yesterday, so it's not too shocking that he didn't play. But sometimes we've seen those doubtful players play. Not ruled out, there's still always a chance. But, like, guys like Devon Achane, he's active, and that'll be a big story. Do you play him or not? Like I mentioned earlier, I've got 4 leagues with Achane. I'm gonna play him in 3 of them. Not throwing him in every single lineup, got good options in those other lineups, but for the most part, I don't I wanna put him in the lineup. So, that's that. Look out for Tyler Lockett later, Alexander Mattison as well for those. Again, knowing he's not with the concussion and he hasn't been cleared yet, I would say it's very unlikely that Alexander Mattison plays. Tyler Lockett, though, he seems like he's a true questionable game time decision. So if you got Tyler Lockett, my advice is put him in the flex spots, and that way you can replace him with someone else. For instance, I'm gonna in a league where I've got Tyler Lockett, I've got Darrell Henderson as his, like, main backup. So that'll be the guy I throw in there in the instance where Lockett isn't active. But I think I like the upside enough of Lockett to go with him if he does play. So, and yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Senra Says. I will gladly answer any questions. DM me if you have anything regarding fantasy football or other. I'll do my best to help out. In addition to these FPC Fantasy Lives on Sunday mornings, I also regularly record the Full Press Fantasy Pod. We usually record typically Tuesday nights, and we'll usually put the podcast out immediately after. Co-host Brad Harvin and I, we talk about some fantasy topics, and we'll also preview the week. We'll talk about apply to we'll expand upon the goal line guide during that as well. We'll talk rankings. Usually, we'll talk about who I'm ranking number one at each position, and also the players that it's furthest away from consensus based on the Fantasy Pros expert consensus ranking. I am a part of. Accuracy contest hasn't always gone great this year. I've had some really good weeks, but I've also had a lot of bad weeks, so it's tough to rank. But my best here, my best on these Sunday mornings. So again, I appreciate everyone joining. Gladys, Matt, Zach, anyone else who's listening or watching. Super appreciative of that. If you're on the Full Press Coverage YouTube page, appreciate if everyone goes and likes the video, also subscribes, get access to all of the great Full Press Coverage videos that will be available throughout the week. And yeah, thank you all very much. Again, my name is Kyle Senra at Senra Says. Enjoy your Sunday today. Enjoy your fantasy football. Oh yeah, the last thing. Happy Grey Cup Day. Again, we're in the Canadian hat. I am a Canadian. Big fan of the CFL. And yeah, this is the championship game today. The Grey Cup. Everything will be decided. Zach Caleros makes his fourth straight start at quarterback in a Grey Cup. No quarterback has ever done that. And if the Winnipeg Blue Bombers win their third Grey Cup in 4 years, this will truly go down as a dynasty and one of the best CFL teams we've ever seen. And it's hilarious that now they've played in 4 straight Grey Cups, and before that 2019 Grey Cup, they had the longest championship drought in the league. Unfortunately, now it's the Hamilton Tiger Cats. But it was like by a lot, like 10 years. And they hadn't won since I think like 1989 or 1990, something like that. And suddenly they're on the verge. They're one game away of going 3 championships in 4 years. So how things eventually turn. So we'll see if the Blue Bombers competed or if the Montreal Alouettes would get 2 big upsets 2 weeks in a row. I think they were 10.5-point underdogs or like 11-point underdogs last week in the East Final, and they won. They won by like 20 as well. 9 turnovers on the other team, and that happens. And then this week, I think there is something like half-point underdogs again. So they were math underdogs last week at work. We'll find out if they can do it again. Enjoy the Grey Cup for those watching, but for most of you, I'd imagine enjoy your fantasy football today, folks. Best of luck to everyone with their line of decisions. You can go get those wins today where fantasy regular season is coming to a close. I mean, like Scott Fishbowl, this is the last week of the regular season. So, yeah, it's that time of the year, crunch time. So hopefully we're able to do the best we can, not only here on Sunday mornings, but also on the Full Press Fantasy Pod. You can follow us at FPC_Fantasy Pod. Until next weekend, I'm Kyle Stenra, and thank you for watching another edition of FP.